The Rise, Fall, and Fight of Delonte West. The moment Delonte West received his bipolar diagnosis, his immediate reaction was one of complete bewilderment. "What does that mean?" he asked, and then went home and looked it up on Google. That single detail tells you everything you need to know about a man whose extraordinary life has swung between breathtaking triumph and devastating collapse. His journey from hitting playoff game winners alongside LeBron James to being found unconscious and not breathing on a roadside, requiring 2 separate doses of Narcan just to be kept alive, is unlike anything professional basketball has ever witnessed. But to understand the fall, you first have to understand where the man came from, because the story does not begin with viral videos, mugshots, or panhandling photographs that broke the internet. It begins with a child from Prince George's County, Maryland, who discovered that a basketball could serve the same purpose other people assigned to therapy. Delonte Maurice West was born on July 26, 1983, in Washington, D.C., and raised in poverty across Prince George's County. His parents' divorce sent him bouncing between homes and relatives, though he would later describe his upbringing as a happy poor household. His mother worked relentlessly. Government jobs, grocery store shifts, hotel reception work, doing whatever it took to keep food on the table. But financial hardship was only one layer of the struggle. Delonte's mixed African-American, Native American, specifically Piscataway, and white heritage gave him light skin and reddish hair that made him a constant target for cruelty. Classmates mocked his large ears, a mole on the back of his head, a birthmark below his lip, and a speech impediment. This was not ordinary playground teasing. It was identity-level rejection, the kind that does not merely sting but rewires a child's entire sense of self-worth from the inside out. Years later, Delonte would identify this deep-seated self-loathing, not bipolar disorder, not any clinical condition, as the true core wound that followed him throughout his entire life. Basketball became the escape hatch. On the court, nobody could laugh at him, and every ounce of humiliation transmuted into something purposeful and powerful. Then, in 8th grade around 1997, when Delonte was approximately 14 years old, a leg injury ripped that escape away entirely. He stopped attending school. His mother, overwhelmed and out of options, sent him to live with his father in rural Louisa County, Virginia, and what followed was, by his own account, the moment everything detonated. He began cutting himself, started abusing prescription pills with names he could not pronounce, and cycled repeatedly through children's hospitals. He made multiple suicide attempts as a teenager, and in one particularly devastating moment at a hospital in Cumberland, Maryland, he dropped to his knees and prayed, making a deal with God right there on that hospital floor. "Let me survive. Get me to the NBA and I will glorify your name." Somehow, against every conceivable odd, basketball pulled him back. Looking back as an adult, Delonte tried to reframe some of those darkest moments, once describing that period as essentially crying for attention and calling himself a spoiled brat in retrospect. But the trauma was real. The hospitals were real. The scars were real. And the fact that basketball, not medication or intervention, was what ultimately brought him back reveals precisely what the game meant to this child. It was not a hobby or a passion. It was oxygen. At Eleanor Roosevelt High School in Greenbelt, Maryland, Delonte dominated, averaging 20.2 points, 6.5 rebounds, 3.9 assists, and 3.1 steals per game as a senior, earning Washington Post All-Met Basketball Player of the Year honors and leading the Raiders to their first-ever state tournament appearance. At St. Joseph's University, paired with Jameer Nelson, the two formed what was widely regarded as one of the greatest backcourts in college basketball history. As a junior in 2003, Delonte averaged 18.9 points and 6.7 assists per game while shooting 41% from three-point range. The Hawks finished a spotless 27-0 in the regular season, went 30-2 overall, and advanced to the Elite Eight as a #1 seed. He delivered a perfect 12-for-12 shooting performance for 33 points against Xavier that earned him National Player of the Week recognition. A young man who had been cutting himself in children's hospitals just years earlier, now hitting every shot he attempted on national television. The Boston Celtics selected him 24th overall in the 2004 NBA draft. And the kid who once prayed on a hospital floor was suddenly learning from Gary Payton and being coached by Doc Rivers. After stints with the Celtics and Seattle, he landed in Cleveland, where LeBron James personally reached out and invited him to join the Cavaliers. 3 months later, he was the starting point guard throwing alley-oops to the best player on the planet. A reality he later summarized with perfect self-awareness. "I wasn't the main man, but I was the man next to the man." During the 2008 to 2009 season, West started all 64 games he appeared in, averaging 11.7 points, 3.5 assists, 3.2 rebounds, and 1.5 steals per game while shooting 45.7% from the field and a career-best 39.9% from three. The Cavaliers went 66-16, a franchise record, and claimed the Eastern Conference's top seed. In the 2009 playoffs, he averaged 13.8 points per game across 14 starts, including a 22-point explosion in Game 6 against the Orlando Magic, and had already announced himself with a clutch game-winning three-pointer against the Washington Wizards in the 2008 postseason. He signed a 3-year, $12.7 million contract and earned roughly $16 million across 8 NBA seasons. The kid who grew up happy poor had become a millionaire several times over. The prayer had been answered, but sometimes the answer arrives carrying conditions nobody warned you about. In 2008, following a preseason scrimmage where he erupted in anger at a high school referee and felt an overwhelming urge to abandon the team, Dante sought professional help. A DC area specialist diagnosed him with bipolar disorder, and his reaction was devastatingly human. He had never been told he had any emotional condition whatsoever and had to Google the diagnosis just to understand what it meant. He began taking medication, including quetiapine, and even planned a foundation to support young people with bipolar disorder. Then, on September 17, 2009, he was pulled over in Maryland on a 3-wheeled motorcycle for a minor traffic violation. Police found a 9mm Beretta in his waistband, a Ruger .357 Magnum strapped to his leg, a Remington 870 shotgun in a guitar case, and a knife. His explanation was straightforward. His mother had warned him his cousin's children had found the weapons in a closet, and he was relocating them. He had also taken a newly prescribed medication for the first time that evening, one that hit him with a drowsiness he had never previously experienced. The internet had no interest in context. He pleaded guilty to weapons and traffic charges, received electronic monitoring, unsupervised probation, 40 hours of community service, and psychological counseling, and the NBA suspended him for the first 10 games of the 2010-11 season. Overnight, his narrative shifted from clutch role player to cautionary tale and baseless rumors, including unfounded allegations about a personal relationship with LeBron James' mother, which West has consistently and emphatically denied, embedded themselves permanently in his public identity. The stigma destroyed his earning power in concrete, measurable terms. From approximately $4.5 million per year down to the league minimum on every subsequent contract, with each new team requiring him to see a therapist before they would even consider signing him. By 2012, having burned through his $16 million in earnings through lavish spending, poor investments, and tax complications, Dante had stopped taking medication entirely, coming to believe the bipolar diagnosis had never fully accounted for the unique pressures of an NBA player's life. He was waived by the Mavericks, briefly played overseas in China and Venezuela, and made a final D-League push with the Texas Legends, averaging 14.8 points per game before injuries ended even that. By 2015, his playing career was over. In February 2016, photographs emerged showing him barefoot in a hospital gown outside a Houston area Jack in the Box. In June 2016, images of him panhandling in Temple Hills, Maryland, went viral. The arrests mounted vehicle trespassing and public intoxication in Fairfax County in October 2022. Then in June 2024, found unresponsive after a foot chase and revived with Narcan, the first dose failing to work, a second dose required at the hospital. In November 2025, police discovered him unconscious and not breathing on a roadside in Fairfax County and administered Narcan once more. And in December 2025, he was arrested for allegedly robbing a man of $23 on Richmond Highway in Belle Haven, Virginia. $23. From a man who had earned $16 million playing professional basketball. Mark Cuban had personally intervened in 2020, picking Dante up from a gas station, funding rehabilitation in Florida, and connecting him with a recovery program run by former NBA player Jason Williams. For a period, the updates were encouraging. Then Dante threw his belongings over a fence and disappeared. They brought him back. It happened again. Cuban eventually summarized the brutal truth with quiet devastation. Mental illness is real. It is real. And you don't just wish it away. You don't just rehab it away. That statement deserves to sit with every person who ever reduced Delonte West to a punchline or a meme, because behind every viral image was a man who had named his son Cash, after Cassius Clay and Johnny Cash, and had deliberately declined to give him the surname Delonte West Jr., knowing what the world had done with that name. I don't want my son going to school and people making fun of him for something his daddy did, he said. That is not a meme. That is a father protecting his child from the wreckage the internet made of his life. In late March 2026, at 42 years old, Dante stood in front of a camera in Florida looking healthier than he had appeared in years, present, aware, grounded, and announced he was 100 days sober, the longest reported stretch of sobriety he had achieved in years. Maybe the cycle repeats. Maybe it doesn't. But the same grit that carried him through children's hospitals in Maryland, from Prince George's County to St. Joseph's to the NBA, the same quality that made him steady and dangerous enough to stand next to the greatest player in the world, it has never left him. At 100 days sober, Delonte West is still showing up. And that is not a tragedy. That is a fighter.